Well, hello. How fantastic to see so many of you here. I'm Kate Mosse. I'm a novelist, non-fiction writer and playwright. And as you know, I have the great good fortune to interview some of the brilliant people that bring their work to Chichester, both the Minerva and the Main House. Although any of you will have heard Justin pointing out that I have failed to interview him at all this season. And it is not deliberate. I've been on different things. This is, can you believe it, the very last show to open of the 2024 season, and what a cracker it is, the show. Sorry, I looked at you at that moment, Paul Hunter, which looked as I was making an inappropriate comment. It is a great pleasure to have Paul Hunter here, who is the director of The Cat and the Canary, but also the artistic director and co-founder of the extraordinary Told by an Idiot company, and bringing this new adaptation of a very famous kind of comedy, gothic horror play from the 1920s written by John Willard. So, Paul, welcome to the Minerva.
Thank you very much.
For those people who don't know your work and what your company does, could you just give a little context before we start talking about this particular play?
Yes, certainly. Told by an Idiot was formed 31 years ago. It was me and two other idiots, an actor called Hayley Carmichael, who performs in Cat and the Canary, and a brilliant teacher, director and writer called John Wright. And we met in 1986 when Hayley and I were students of John's at a drama school in London. And when I went there, I was about 18, and my experience of theatre was fairly limited. I think it ran from seeing Danny LaRue in pantomime in Birmingham, where I was born, to occasional trips to Stratford-upon-Avon to see some Shakespeare. But I had a fairly limited notion of what acting was. And when I met Hayley there, who I didn't know, and then we embarked on this course, and a lot of the teaching, I would say, was fairly traditional. Some people have been there rather a long time. And some of the, I remember some of the teaching, it involved things like the advice given when you were in a Shakespeare play was, to us young students, was to find a point in a speech where you might be able to lean against something. I still employ that as an actor, occasionally, to lean against something. And then we encountered John's classes. John taught what was called improvisation, mask work, and movement, and I didn't really know what any of this stuff was. And then when we encountered it, it's fair enough to say it kind of blew our minds, Hayley and me, that John had studied at Lecoq School in Paris and with Philippe Gaulier and various European teachers, and his ideas of what theatre could be changed how I thought theatre was, and it changed my direction right very, very early on. So a lot of that teaching was about the actor as a creator, not just an interpreter of a text or a play, but improvising. And I remember saying to him, "You mean I can make it up?" And he went, "Yeah, you can make it up." And this was not only revelatory, but it was also drawing on very old theatre traditions. Something that I really always fascinated me was the world of commedia dell'arte, which came out of Italy in the 1600s, and it was a fully improvised form of highly physical theatre. And it often would be one family who would turn up in a square in the town somewhere, and they would improvise their play. And it would involve extreme physical comedy, a thing called a lazzi, which is a piece of business that an actor would create. And we kind of did a lot of that, and I thought, wow, this is brilliant. So the company started, I should say, as a company we made our work up. We had a starting point, and then we improvised, and then at the end of a rehearsal period, we then presented this play.
But with words as well.
Yes.
So you weren't mime.
No, we weren't a mime company. No. Although we have, actually, sitting on this stage, I don't know if anyone here saw it, we bought one of our shows here a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago, called Charlie and Stan, which was about the early life of Charlie Chaplin and Stan Laurel. And that contained no words at all, because we wanted to make a silent movie on stage. But there were certain key things that fascinated us then and remain fascinating to us now. One of which was we became very interested and remain interested by trying to inhabit the space between laughter and pain. And we thought that was quite an intriguing place to be. theatre-wise, and we've constantly searched for that. So we do comedies, and hopefully those of you who come tonight or whenever will enjoy the comedy of this, but we've always been interested in mixing these things together. The other thing that we, I suppose, had no interest in was trying to recreate reality on stage. We've never been interested in that. We've always been of the opinion that film and TV will always do that better than theatre can. For me, theatre is about the imagination. It's about metaphor. It's about creating something where the audience imagine something rather than trying to fill all those gaps in. A big hero of mine and a big influence on our work was, I think he was initially German before he moved to America, a film director called Ernst Lubitsch. And he said something once which really stuck in my head. He said, the job of the director is to say 2 + 2. Let the audience say 4 or make 4. And I really, the audience, you guys, are such an important piece of that jigsaw. So our work is highly theatrical. It's often very physical. And I think we've always revelled in the unexpected and the unpredictable, which is partly why we were drawn to this play. But we've always been of the opinion that if we are signalling very heavily to the audience that we're going to turn right, you can bet your bottom dollar we're going to turn left. And that's always been something where we've kind of always wanted to tantalise the audience, to bring the audience more forward in their seats. If I'm at home and I'm watching MasterChef with my wife, I'm very happy to sit like this and relax. At the theatre, I want to be more engaged. I want to be going, okay, what's happening now, or what's about to happen?
Do you want the audience to feel nervous?
I think there's a few nerves in this particular play, but I suppose, that's a good question. It brings me to another thing that fascinates us. I want the audience to have a really great time at the theatre. And there's a word that we use, which sometimes is a word which I think sometimes people look down on, is the word entertainment. I think entertainment is really, really important. And it struck me a few years ago. I was wandering around an old bookshop, and I saw a second-hand copy of Graham Greene's novel Brighton Rock. And on the novel it said, Brighton Rock, an entertainment by Graham Greene. And I thought, if it's good enough for Graham Greene, then... I also think I don't know the exact origin of this, but there's an old French word of entertainment, meaning to hold together. And I really like that notion that we as a company, our actors, it's about holding you guys for a couple of hours in a particular place, and you're part of that. We need to kind of embrace you in some way in that live experience. So I suppose the final thing, in a way, is the audience is always crucial, and the sense of it being live. I like theatre that exists and can only exist in a live environment. I'm not very interested in the notion of theatre being filmed. I think either make a film or make theatre, but they're two different things.
And it will be a different and unique experience every night because the audience brings themselves.
Absolutely, and the way we've made the show and the way we play, it's never the same. So I think spontaneity is another big thing. Anyway, I've rambled on, but there's
brilliant.
a bit of history about what we're about and gives you a bit of context.
It's fantastic context. The thing with the Canat and the Canary, it was one of those very famous, almost the first of that genre, the kind of the comedy horror on Broadway, I think 1922, John Willard's play. And it's been made into, I think, 4 films and it's been redone. But this is a new version, and it's not set on the Hudson River. It's set in Cornwall on Bodmin Moor in the 1950s. So can you just say a little bit about how this version and your involvement in this? I know it's a co-production between Told by an Idiot and Chichester. So how did this new version come about? Well,
you're absolutely right. The history of the play is exactly that. It's kind of as you say, Kate, the first of its kind, this play. It's the first of that classic genre that we all love, of an old spooky house in the middle of nowhere on a winter's night, where a group of relatives turn up to hear a will being read, and then all hell breaks loose. So it is the first one of its kind. In fact, Rian Johnson, an American movie director who did, I thought, a really good film called Knives Out a few years ago, which is exactly that. He cites this play, Willard's play, as being the big influence on that. So that's what kind of resonates all the way through. I've wanted to do the play for about 15 years, and I was directing in Manchester, and I tried to get the rights and couldn't. And then about 2 years ago, my friend Carl, the writer, I was on the way to a meeting, someone asking me about doing something, and I said, do you own the rights still to your version of The Cat and the Canary? Because basically Carl, before COVID, did this adaptation, and it was produced commercially by Bill Kenwright's company. And he said, I think it sits with Kenwright. Anyway, I investigated a bit, and I spoke to a producer there, and they said, oh, we'd be interested in Told by an Idiot having a go at this. And then I knew Justin, the director here. In fact, I'm obviously much older than Justin. I sadly have to say he assisted me when he was a young director on a couple of shows. So we had shared a kind of room together. And I just thought, when I think about Chichester and friends who have performed here, it just felt like a play that might fit quite well. And particularly at this end slot as the nights draw in. And
the spooky slot.
Yes, the spooky slot. And also I said, you know, our job is to reimagine this play, is not just to present it, but to reinvent it, to investigate it, to... so that's how it came about. But then, for me, and I think this with any play, for me, a play initially is just words on a page. They might be great words, but it's not theatre. Theatre, for me, doesn't happen until something happens. Me standing up, something's happened. And that's where theatre happens. It doesn't happen. I'm not in any way sitting next to a very brilliant writer. I'm not in any way denigrating.
You're dead to me, Paul, now.
The written word, but that's the beginning. The theatre has to happen, as I said, when something happens in the room. And I had a real burning desire to, if you like, to do all the classic things that an audience would expect in one of these plays. Eyes moving in a portrait. A secret panel mysteriously opening, the house being plunged into darkness, a body being discovered, all these things that we go, I almost went tick, tick, yes, we want all of these things. But how we deliver them, I said, can't be as you expect it. We have to find a different way of delivering it, which then takes the play and tilts the play in some way. And I think Carl's setting of Cornwall in the early 1950s is inspired, because it's enabled us, without giving anything away, to draw on things that maybe exist in that part of the country, which is good. I'm trying to vaguely not give anything away. But also, it's close to the war and the trauma of the war, and that interested me when Carl kind of leans into that a little bit with some of the characters who have gone through the war, not in a heavy, dramatic way, but it's there as a reference, and that provoked us in many ways, and the design, which is obviously hidden at the top of the play.
But also, at that period of time, there is a desire to return to a stability that has been lost, but that can never be found again. Exactly. So already society is kind of, you know, at tension.
Yeah, which felt, and also people, you know, damaged, and all of that is in the play in a way. And I suppose, as well as trying to deliver that, there was also in my mind, the other reason for doing it was, you mentioned the films, the Bob Hope film from 1939 with Paulette Goddard. I saw with my dad when I was about 10, and I loved it. I loved Bob Hope. I thought, how does this guy get to be in this film and then do these jokes and do the... So, in some ways, the show is a homage to that kind of golden period of Hollywood comedy as well, and that style, which I think we've tried to reimagine in a contemporary way.
Now, I mean, it's an ensemble company, an amazing company of 9 people, and you mentioned Hayley Carmichael, one of the founders, and she's in it. And some of the performers, actors, have worked together before for you and in other things, and others haven't. What I loved, if you go onto the CFT website, there's a little trailer and there's an interview with you and all of these things, is that every one of the actors is saying how much they felt they were able to bring their own ideas and themselves into the room. So how do you manage that when you're in rehearsal, when you've got a script and you've got it's quite a detailed script in terms of description and, you know, the text. So how do you make it possible for people to bring something extra without unbalancing the script?
It's a good question. I think at the heart of that, and we were touching on that when we were stood back there, I'm very much an actor who directs. I love directing, but I love acting. And prior to this, I was acting in something, and then I've come to this. And I think...
But it's a very... I mean, the point is you do very different types of work in different spaces.
Yes, of course, inevitably as an actor. But I think where, in some ways, I benefit is the company know that I'm an actor. I've acted with many of them, or they've seen me act. And I think... I'm not saying it means everything always runs smoothly, but I think there is maybe a kind of trust there because they go, well, they know, well, he does what we do. And I think there's a kind of shorthand then that happens. I also think, for me, this is maybe more about the job of the director. I don't see the job of the director being someone who tells everyone what to do. I don't see the director as the person who has all the ideas. I see the way I look at directing is the director is a provocateur. My job is to cast it really well, which I think I have, brilliant actors, and then my job is to provoke them. Not to heavily direct them and tell them what to do, but to provoke them and provoke their imagination and their choices.
So they find something inside themselves.
Exactly. And then if you've got brilliantly creative actors, they'll keep inventing and keep... The biggest problem I have with this gang is to stop them inventing.
Yes.
Paul, we thought we could do this, we could do that. Yeah, let's just try and... So, of course, once you unleash that creativity, it's a wonderful thing. And also, the actors feel they really own the material. What I love about what happens in the show is I've sort of... Again, I don't want to give anything away. There's a moment just before the interval. But I remember saying to the actor, I said, well, we know the script tells us something happens here, but what if it's not completely happened? This sounds very vague, but I think that by not completely happening, that provoked the performer to go further and a bit further and then into a different place. So I think the acting helps. It's also worth saying we have certain key phrases we've developed over the years that we stick up on our rehearsal room wall. And one of the phrases which we often return to, which is very applicable in this process, was someone years ago in one of our rooms said, if it's bad, make it worse. And I thought that was really liberating because most comedy, I would argue, this is my thesis, comes from a situation getting progressively worse. Now, I'm happy for you to find me in the bar later and give me an example of a comedy where everything gets progressively better, but I challenge you to find that out. Fawlty Towers begins with Basil struggling at the desk, and the episode ends with him beating his car with a stick. That's the stuff of comedy. And once you tap into that, or you unlock that, you unlock many possibilities. Because sometimes an actor might make a choice. They might fall to their knees. And then their instinct might be, well, I've got to get up. I've gone down, I must get up. Whereas we go, what happens if you stay down there? What happens if you don't get up? You'll notice in the play, there's very little places, few places, this isn't a spoiler, where the actors can sit. There's a very conscious decision with me and the designer who said, don't give lots of places to sit down. If you give places to sit down, people will come on and go, ah. And the energy does that. This is the energy and attention from the word go, where a group of people are desperate for this money. They've travelled from Calcutta, New York, London, all for this money. It's got to be mine. And what I don't want to see is people lounging around going, oh, well, I wonder who's going to get it. I want people coming in going, when's the will going to be? When are we reading the will? And it sounds an obvious thing to say, but it's a restriction, and we work from restriction a lot. And of course, you'll see the set, and there is somewhere, but it means it helps this energy remain up, and we have to keep that up, and we have to keep making it worse, as you see, because the play demands that. A situation starts, and for one night in this house, it gets progressively...
Yes, because it's a very short period of time.
Yes, it happens. They arrive at 10 at night, and they're done by dawn.
But in terms, there's elements of kind of anarchy and almost European circus and all of these kind of things. But in terms of the physical humour, as opposed to the words that are given...
Which are also, Carl's writing is very funny as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So one of the things that every director I've ever talked to on these stages has said, that the moment that you go from the rehearsal room into the performance space is even more critical in comedy than it is in a straight drama, in that things that you have found hilarious sometimes don't quite land. Now, how do you deal with that once you have very short preview period. When you sit there, do you think, oh, we all thought that was brilliant, but it's got to go? Or do you just, how much, I suppose, latitude do you have with the script to make changes?
Well, Carl and I collaborated before on many things, and Carl is, I think, a great writer, and he's also a great collaborator.
Yeah.
The collaboration of genuinely interrogating that play has meant things have changed, things have gone, all of this, and he's always been up for that process. What you said just then, Kate, is actually true, is if we create something that we believe is funny, and in a way all you've got is your instinct, we create something in a room with a group of people and we laugh, we have to trust that. However, and come in front of an audience and we've gone, oh, we thought that was, and then it doesn't get anything. In a purely practical term, we come back the next day and we go, that's interesting, that's not landing, and then there might be some theories about could be about rhythm, it could be about how it's delivered, and we make some changes, and then we come back and we see it again, and the next night it doesn't work. We kind of operate a 3 strikes rule. So it might be that on the second night this particular gag or routine is hovering over the trap door, but if it's meant to be funny and it's not funny, it will go. We wouldn't leave it in there, And likewise, what's wonderful for us is things that we didn't think were funny are suddenly funny. There's things in this that I thought, I didn't think that was particularly a laugh, and the audience have really laughed at it. It's because you can never predict everything. You can control certain things, but there's some things in this, and I went, oh God, they really laugh at that. I never thought that would be, which I love, of course.
And do you think that's partly because by the time you get in here, you've been with the material for a long time, or just because people's age and their experiences make the comedy slightly different? It's a relationship, not just a bam.
Well, I think the coming in here is different, this brilliant space. I think that does make a difference. I should also say when we rehearse, we don't rehearse the way necessarily a lot of rehearsals take place. In most rehearsals with a play, particularly a new play, the first week would be around a table and you would read the play and you would discuss the play. We had no table and we don't read the play. From the word go, we're on our feet. And the actors, to be fair to them, I said to them, this is such a physical play, you're going to have to learn this as quick as possible. And even if they didn't know it, we would feed them the lines. So we were up and playing right from the get-go, because we only had 4 weeks. And also the play is not Shakespeare. You know what I mean? It's not a densely written poetic play. It's a play of action and events. And the dialogue's very snappy.
I read the script, and it's very snappy, isn't it?
And it's not a play of psychology. So it felt very important to us that we got things going. But I don't know. I firmly believe that if you've got a really rich situation, which is comic, it unites an audience. Last night was a great night. All the nights have been wonderful. But we had 2 sizable school groups in last night, one there and one there. And I think they were either A-level students or GCSE, so maybe 50, 16, that sort of age. And it meant that the demographic of the audience was really mixed and diverse. But what was great was everybody was laughing at the same thing. And I think that's really interesting that everyone is united. And that's partly our aim, is to make a show that anyone from 10 to 110 can enjoy. It should have a wide appeal, a show like this.
But that's what's so fantastic about your work anyway, which is that people can come in. You gave a brilliant context to what you do and how the company works right at the beginning. But actually anybody can come in knowing nothing and just be themselves engaging with what's happening on the stage. Yeah. And that works, doesn't it?
No, that's very much you don't need any knowledge, you don't need any understanding of what we do. I was encountering some audience members in the pub over the road that we tend to retire to after an evening's work. And they were really honest. It was really interesting having a chat with them when they were talking to the actors. And one of the actors said, we really, really enjoyed it. And I think one of them said, we didn't know what to expect because we knew the original and then it started and we totally went into this world of, our job also is to take you with us and to find ways of, in a sense, indicating to you quite early on what kind of evening it is. That's, you know, it's just reassurance. This is where we are. This is what it is, and it comes back to that holding an audience, I think. Yeah.
And you said very early on, you talked about exploring the space between laughter and pain. Mm-hmm. When you say pain, do you mean that as kind of actually the real story that's being told is quite tragic, or someone is being bullied into madness, or victim? You know, what do you mean by pain?
Yeah, I think for us, it often means situations where someone might be. I'm trying to think of an example of one of our shows now without using this play as an example, but it's more about when you can create a situation where the audience are really laughing at a situation, and then suddenly they become aware that maybe they shouldn't be laughing. And now this has become something quite uncomfortable. And Hayley, who is in the show playing part of Mrs. Pleasant, who was here a few years ago in the David Story play Home. Yes. Anyone saw that? She was in that. She's a phenomenal, I'm biased, but she's, I think, one of our best actors. And she has an ability to be, she's utterly present, but she has the ability to be brilliantly comic, and then it tips into something else. And it's not, obviously, lots of people do this brilliantly. Alan Bennett does it brilliantly. I don't know if any of you remember the Talking Heads things that he did on TV. They were hysterically funny, but then at times suddenly really moving or really uncomfortable. And Bennett is a master at it. So I think that's where a lot of the humanity lies. That's what life is. Life, do you know what I mean? We're in between these things. Yeah. So it's probably more of an emotional state.
Yes, and it's kind of almost a plangency about it, I suppose, isn't it?
Yes.
You know, with all of that. And you'd been thinking about the play. You'd tried to get the rights. You've come at it a different way, and you've created this thing. When you knew you were going to do it, and you were putting your creative team together before you'd got your cast and you're doing that, did you have a really strong visual sense in your head of, you know, is this what was in Paul Hunter's head a few years ago? Or are you quite open? You say, okay, show me your ideas, you know, say it to Angela Davis, your designer.
I think the notion of an imagined world, a sense where, again, as I said, it's not totally filled in, was in my head. But again, provoked by Angela's brilliant imagination, the journey that then went on was surprising. But I think we both started from the starting point that we didn't want to create a big house on stage with doors and walls and put this. What we wanted to do was create the elements of things that would exist in this type of house. So again, for the audience, we want them to come in and recognise things. So we don't want the audience to go, oh, this is very abstract, where are we? We want them to look at certain elements and go, oh yes, there's that and there's this. The only things you haven't got are the walls or windows, but you've got all these certain key elements that go, it's this type of house. So in a way, without behind me, what Angela did brilliantly, we started from what are the key elements that would suggest this big old house on Dartmoor or Bodmin Moor.
You know, an individual thing representing the whole.
Exactly, where you go, if we have this and then we have that, and if you put those elements together. So I suppose I had a bit of an idea of a kind of world, but it was very much provoked by Angela's brilliant imagination.
Because it's very, very clever, because in a weird sort of way, the house itself is also a character, isn't it? So the fact that it isn't actually here, that's genius.
Yeah, well, I think that was Angela's, when Angela started to go, because, again, in the play, the person who's died, Cyrus West, is a very particular character. And more Angela said, I wonder if the house should be like his imagination, the inside of his head. And we looked at a film. We often go to movies as a reference that some of you might remember. There was a film in about 1973 called Sleuth with Laurence Olivier and Michael Caine. And Michael Caine has been having an affair with Olivier's character's wife. And Olivier invites him to his house. There's only two of them in it. And his house is full of tricks, full of, you know, uneasy, macabre objects that sort of... And so that was the visual world of something like Sloof was a bit of a reference for the world as well, the kind of playful trickery of Cyrus
And you
West.
do wonder, quite a lot of people have said that The Cat and the Canary was quite significant for them. But when I was reading the script, I thought, God, I wonder if Agatha Christie ever saw the play, because she was in America at about the right sort of time. She was starting to write at about the same sort of time. But for many of those, not least of all, And Then There Were None, the idea that the disembodied voice...
No,
kind of here, isn't it?
And Then There Were None, exactly.
Yeah.
No, it's very close. Obviously the comic thing is, but yes, it's an interesting theory. Yeah.
I mean, it's completely unsubstantiated, but obviously, just put it out there. This is a question I often ask because, for me, when I go and see something that I've loved and been completely immersed in, I do always think, well, what am I feeling now, having seen that? So, do you have that thought about your audience, that you want your audience to feel in a particular way or experience the play in a particular way? Or are you open to any response, really? When they come to find you in the bell later?
I think there are certain things in the play that I hope land in a particular way and hopefully the audience enjoy and laugh. So that's me wanting a particular response. Other moments in the show I'm much more interested in interpretation without giving anything away. I think it's not necessarily my job to explain what something means. I think I'm very happy to hear. I've already heard people say, "Oh God, so is it this?" And I go, "It could be," and that's not a cop-out. That's not a cop-out. It's just that I don't always want to go, I'm going to create something in which you guys are in no doubt about what you're supposed to think. Because I don't find, it's not the stuff that I sometimes want to be left going, I wonder if that, or is that? Rather than going, I want to, and in some ways, obviously I make the work that interests me, of course I do. I mean, a phrase I sometimes find strange for me is when I hear people say, I went to see a play the other night and I didn't enjoy it. And I go, why? I said, well, it wasn't what I expected. And I find myself going, what a strange thing. I have no desire to go to the theatre and see exactly what I expected. I find that a very bizarre notion. In fact, I would be disappointed if the same way sometimes, you know what it's like at home when you watch a crime thing on the telly and you go, well, it's clearly him. Or I don't want that. I want the unexpected. I mean, our tagline as a company is creating the unexpected since 1993. And that's exactly what I want. So apologies if it's not what you expected, but I've made it very clear that that's not what I'm interested in. But I suppose there's a double thing there. I've got, like I said, to recap, I definitely want them to laugh at various points, but we've also very consciously tapped into stuff that is open to interpretation as well.
And it should be, you mentioned Graham Greene, and he did divide his fiction into those he called entertainments and those he didn't. But surely we go to the theatre to be entertained.
Yes.
Not to be only improved.
No.
It's a mixture of things.
No, and also I think I would make the argument that you can, not talking about our show, but you can do many, many things at the same time as entertaining. You can provoke, you can be political, you can do all of these things, A recent example for me would be the musical Hamilton. One of our cast, Taryn, was in the original production of that, and I saw that with him in. And for me, that's a very political musical, but it's hugely entertaining as well. So it's not a separate thing. It doesn't mean it has to be frivolous.
No, the best do both.
Yes, of course.
Of course they do. Do you encourage, because there were 4 films, and obviously the Bob Hope one is dear to your heart, do you follow your actors outside of the rehearsal room? So do you ask them to do research, or do you leave it up to them? How controlling are you outside the room?
I like to think I'm not, that I think it's an interesting thing as a director as well, because I would say, no, I'm not, I let them, I share the research I'd done. So we had a table in the room where there were various books of stuff that I'd read and Carl had read, a brilliant writer called Robert Aikman.
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant writer of very strange and eerie stories writing in the 1950s. So we put that on the table. Various films like Nicholas Rowe's classic Don't Look Now and stuff like that. So I said, look, this is what we've been doing. You don't have to look at it. So no, I don't tend to control what that is. I think people do their own research. And also I think there's a journey that goes on when you do a play, I think, as a director, because it starts and you're, on the day one, everyone's there and they're all looking at you like this. So you're there to go, okay, this is what we're going to try, blah, blah. But I think a healthy process is, over a period of time, the show ceases slowly being yours and should become the actors. And it should do that so that by the time, hopefully, we have Press Night tomorrow, it's theirs. And more, when I come into the room, it's the conversations between actors. Oh, you know that bit when you were with the glass? They're solving these problems. They don't need me to come over and go,
tell me about the glass.
What's the thing with the glass? Yeah. I let them do that. I also think it's healthy. I'm thinking about me as an actor. They don't need me around all the time. I'm not involved in social media, but I don't need to be on there. I like hanging out with them, but it's theirs. It should be theirs, and ultimately, I think that's a healthy thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Well, I can't think of a better show to finish this season. It's been a wonderful season, and to have a show that is so much fun and with so much energy and different, I think is brilliant. And I mean, I know it's booking incredibly well for people are feeling that. You have your press night tomorrow, so we wish you huge, breaking all the legs and all of those things tomorrow. A final thing before I sign off. All of the pre-show and the post-show talks have been sponsored by Close Brothers Asset Management. And it is worth just reminding everybody that because they do that, these is all free. And this is about CFT wanting to make sure that everybody can have these experiences and listen and speak to the people who are creating the incredible shows. So we're very grateful to that sponsorship. But for now, for all of you who've come to these, thank you very much. It makes a great deal of difference. And Paul Hunter, what a pleasure it has been to talk to you. So ladies and gentlemen, Paul Hunter.